Good evening, everyone. For those of you who do not know me, I'm Jordy Roberts. I'm the coordinator of music at this church, and I have known Elizabeth Summerson since February the 2nd, 1992, which is when I started conducting the choir here. Thank you for being here. A little word of explanation about why this memorial event is what it is. When I asked Elizabeth what she wanted for a funeral, she said, "I don't care, I'll be dead." Which was not very helpful. She did say that she wanted her ashes taken back to the UK, and she wanted me to sing some Gilbert and Sullivan. And I thought, what on earth in all of Gilbert and Sullivan is there that would be appropriate for a funeral? And there's really nothing. So I thought, let's have a party instead. And so from that starting point, we have ended up here tonight with a lot of help from a lot of people. Thank you all very much. You're all noted on the back of the program, and if I forgot you, I apologize. Elizabeth was a wonderful soprano, and so the music has been chosen to reflect soprano's willingness to show off a little bit. Please do not try to make connections between the musical selections and Elizabeth's life. There's nothing biographical about any of this. They are just fun. And so I'd like to introduce our singers, Rachel Buttress and Bella Kershaw and Alyssa Sampson, all of whom I have had the pleasure of teaching singing over the years, and other people have improved on their talents since. And we're going to start with probably the most familiar piece of Gilbert and Sullivan, maybe after the Major General, perhaps. Here we go.
Everything is a source of fun. Hi, thank you all for being here. I'm Catherine McNeat. Auntie Elizabeth was part of my brothers Rick and Malcolm and my sister Allison's lives for over 60 years. She met my parents, Charles and Elizabeth, doing what she loved most, which was singing. And this time it was in doing Florodora with the Knox Light Opera Company, and has been part of our life since. Anyway, Auntie Elizabeth, just going back a little, was spending Christmas 1959 with my mom and my dad. And my brother was 1 year old at the time. And Mom went into labor with me. And that was Christmas night, 1959. And apart from Mom and Dad, Auntie Elizabeth has known me longer than anybody else. And she became my godmother and a permanent member of our family. With few exceptions, she was at every family event, every Christmas, every Thanksgiving, every Easter, weddings, christenings. You know, she was just a permanent part there. And if she wasn't there, there was a void there. It was we definitely missed her. And what she also did every year on Boxing Day to celebrate my birthday, she hosted dinner or lunch for our family. And again, very few years were missed. But so she was a lot of power packed into a small package there. As a young woman, she had the courage to come to Canada by herself and the determination to make it on her own. She was, as you all know, fiercely independent, and she worked hard to support herself and was able to achieve many of her dreams. Her retirement at the age of 66 did not slow her down one little bit. She was a dynamo and moved with purpose, volunteering at the thrift store, at the church, taking college courses at Capilano College when it was a college, and always singing in the choir. She traveled to many places that she had dreamed of and was always busy doing something. She was never one to stay idle. And she loved shopping at the thrift stores and took great pleasure indulging herself with jewelry almost to the very end. You always knew where you stood with Auntie Elizabeth. I will miss her frankness, her kindness, and her love. I'm so grateful that I was able to spend time with her towards the end so that I could chat about her life and show her the love that she gave me and my family. Elizabeth had done most of what she'd wanted to do during her lifetime and was looking forward to her final journey. I'm full of gratitude for all the assistance and time that Jordy, my sister, and all the other people from the church that helped her out and enabled her to stay independent and earn her own home right to the very end. And she passed away peacefully, just as she wanted in her own home. So I'm sure that she is with us today, and she will be enjoying a glass of sherry and listening to the music. And Jordy, if there's a bottle missing, you'll know where it went. Right. So thank you all for being here.
So Elizabeth has two living relatives, and they're both in Newcastle area, Linda and David. And Linda sent this note by email. Linda is I think she's in Corfu this week. And so she's going to watch this on YouTube when she gets back from her holidays. So farewell to Auntie Betty. When I was a child, I loved like a child, I understood like a child, and I thought like a child. Auntie Betty guided me through life during my childhood. David and I were both children when she left for her new life at 4 and 6 years old. Throughout the intervening 66 years, we only saw her 5 times. She was always on the lookout for Edinburgh woolen mills, searching for cozy cardigans. She also adored blancmange. I remember one time in Cornwall when she thoroughly enjoyed a speedboat ride, even though I was terrified. At my wedding, her voice resonated above all others. It was the only time I ever heard her sing. I also recall her curled up on our sofa with Bessie, our beloved dog. They were great pals. What I miss most is her voice. Whenever we spoke on the phone, it never failed to lift my spirits. So as a final farewell to Auntie Betty, I'll remember our customary exchange at the end of our calls. I love you, I would say, and she would reply, I've loved you longer. I truly miss that. Goodbye and God bless you, Auntie Betty. May you now enjoy your trifle and sherry in the sky. Linda and David.
Things are seldom what they seem. Skim milk masquerades as cream. High-lows, buses, painted leathers. Jackdaws strut in peacock's feathers.
Very true, so they do.
Black sheep dwell in every fold. All that glitters is not gold. Storks turn out to be but logs. Bulls are but inflated frogs.
So they be frequently.
Drops the wind and stops the mill. Turbot his ambitious brill. Gilds a farthing if you will. Yet it is a farthing still.
Yes, I know that is so. Though to catch your drift I'm striving. It is shady, it is shady. I don't see at what you're driving, mystic lady, mystic lady.
Stern convictions are stealing. That the mystic lady is dealing in oracular revealing.
Yes, I know.
That is so.
Though I'm anything but clever, I could talk like that forever. Once a cat was killed by care, only brave deserve the fair.
Very true, so they do.
Wink is often good as nod, spoils the child who spares the rod. Thirsty lambs run foxy dangers, dogs are found in many mangers.
Frequently, I agree.
Of cats the chestnut snatches, worn of garments show new patches. Only count the chick that hatches, never grown up patchy catches.
Yes, I know that is so. Though to catch my drift he's driving a dissemble. When he sees a one time driving, let him tremble, let him tremble. Oh, a mystic torn my borrow, he shall learn the truth and its sorrow. Here today and gone tomorrow.
Yes, I know.
That is so.
Oh, mystic,
I'll descend,
oh, you borrow,
I'll descend,
I shall learn
let
the
him
truth
tremble,
and sorrow.
let him tremble.
Here
Well, I'm Cheryl Irwin, and yeah. I'm sure we only knew a small part of Elizabeth. There was so much to her, and we just knew that little bit. We knew her as a sprightly and feisty 95-year-old with a wicked sense of humor. This past January 24th, she celebrated that 95th birthday, and she was a birthday twin to my own father and actually lived 3 months longer than my dad. She was very confident in everything and very proud of her accomplishments, like her singing soprano, and the shows she'd been in, and working in the shipping industry. We fondly recall her long-term dedication to the Highlands Senior Choir under the direction of a number of directors, and then laterally her beloved Geordie Roberts came along, and she adopted him immediately. She cherished her time in the choir and often sang, I think Iris Leggett, she sang duets with Iris, and sometimes they maybe competed for solos. In the year 2000, Elizabeth and her good friend Iris Leggett, do you want to stand up, Iris, so everybody can see? She traveled with a group of 21 individuals from Highlands and a few other churches in Alberta and Saskatchewan to Israel and Jordan on a Holy Land tour. On that tour, we loved watching her barter with the sellers in the market and the children on the streets, where she purchased more jewelry, trinkets, hats. She had bought, after Ross White's here, Ross and Jeannie White were on the trip too, and my husband Ken, and Doug and Barb Marjoram would have loved to have been here today, but unfortunately they had a family member that was competing in a dance at the Chan Center tonight, so they send their regrets. So after Ross bought his Muslim kufi hat, Ross? K-U-F-I? Yeah. Elizabeth bought one. She later bequeathed that to my husband. However, his head is a little bigger than little tiny Elizabeth. And those trinkets I'd watched her buy came to me that she bought from those kids in the streets outside some of the places where we'd been. The Vancouver Israel group held a reunion about every 5 years. We were very faithful until a while ago. And our last one happened to be at Kiwanis Care Center, where Edna Hundleby, who'd been on the trip, Edna was in the care facility. So we brought the party to Edna. And sorry, Iris, but you know, the young ones in the group, we carried on and had another party after that. Much reminiscing happened every time we gathered for the reunions, and the trip lived on as we talked about our educational memories of a most amazing trip of a lifetime. Even to the weeks before her passing, I think I'd taken her a photo album and stuff, so we looked at all the pictures from the trip, and she totally remembered it, which is amazing at the age of 95. It created a great bond for us and the group that traveled together. Now, Barb Marjoram couldn't be here, but she remembers Elizabeth and Mike Farnsworth at our first trip orientation meeting. The intrepid Englishwoman meets the Irish Mike. So the sparks flew immediately. And the relationship mellowed on the trip from that first orientation meeting. And Barb was commenting that she really lived life on her own terms for sure. And I know that because I was one of her helpers. There was always joy and laughter when we were with Elizabeth and in her presence, and we will miss that mighty spirit of hers.
Now, this is probably one of the worst ideas I've ever had in my entire musical career, but we're going to try and do a Gilbert and Sullivan sing-along. I have excerpts from the things that we're going to sing, and I'll just warn you, unless you know which line to look at, this could be even more confusing than just trying to sing along from memory, but there are enough here for them to be one between two across the room, so let's spread them around and see how we do. let's see how we make out. Here we go. Response. At the end of each phrase, there's a little bit that you add on to the policeman's song. Here's the rest of it. When a felon's not engaged in his employment, or maturing his felonious little plans, his capacity for innocent enjoyment is just as great as any honest man. Our feelings we with difficulty smother, with constabulary duties to be done. Oh, take one consideration with another. A policeman's lot is not a happy one. Oh, when
Constabulary duties to be done. A policeman's lot is not a happy one.
When the enterprising burglar's not a burgling, when the cutthroat isn't occupied in crime, he loves to hear the little brook a gurgling, and listen to the merry village chime. When the coster's finished jumping on his mother, he loves to lie a-basking in the sun. Oh, take one consideration with another. A policeman's lot is not a happy one. Oh, when
Constabulary duties to be done. A policeman's lot is not a happy one. titwillow, titwillow. Now I feel just as sure as I'm sure that my name is Titwillow, titwillow, titwillow. That was polite affection that made him exclaim, "Oh, willow, titwillow, titwillow." And if you remain callous and obdurate, I shall perish this bleeding, and you will know why. Though I probably shall not exclaim as I die. Oh, willow, titwillow, titwillow.
Next time we'll do a sing-along, I am the very model of a modern major general.
Someone else has to die?
Do what you have to do, Ken. Okay. So I have spent almost everything I know about Elizabeth I learned in the last 3 years. When COVID started, I started visiting Elizabeth as regularly as Allison has for a long, long time. And I became responsible for a lot of things in her life, and as she kind of, I don't want to say the edges came off her, because she still could put up a good fight the week before she died, but she let loose information that I had never heard before, and sometimes in a very tender and affectionate way, and it was kind of lovely to see her letting her guard down a little bit. So I'm just going to share some memories with you I have of Elizabeth and some impressions. After 30 years, she left an impression with everybody she met, I think. I met Elizabeth in 1992 when I was hired to lead the choir of this church. She had the chair directly in front of me, and her longtime seatmate here this evening, as you know, was right next to her. I'm not sure how I made it onto her A list, and I'm even less sure how I stayed there for 30 years. But her affection for me and my family meant we were some of the relatively few people who she counted as her Canadian family of the heart. And I count myself honored to share a few words about her. She was quite a character. Some stories I have learned over the past 3 years. When Elizabeth was having chemotherapy, she fought breast cancer twice. She would take the bus from her work downtown over to VGH to the oncologist and have her therapy, and then she'd go back to work on the bus afterwards. When the senior choir of this church chose to retire in 2011, there were 2 out of the 22 singers, 7 of whom were over 90 at the time, who voted to just keep going. And one of them was Elizabeth. She was 83. And the other was another Elizabeth who was 95 and was not yet ready to stop. She had, in some ways, an incredible amount of luck. I know that she won a pickup truck in a raffle at some point. Why she bought a raffle ticket on a pickup truck, I think it was probably in support of some good charity or other. A couple of times Francis went to lunch with her, and she found a $20 bill under the table. More than once. She would find a substantial amount of money under the table going out to lunch. My favorite story about her quick temper involves her sometimes rough relationship with her boss, Maynard, who was the CEO of Anglo-Canadian for a while, not as long as Elizabeth was the head of Anglo-Canadian, but almost. Maynard gave Elizabeth a ride in his lovely new car, and as a special treat in the cold weather, he turned on the heated front seat. And she went up one side of him and down the other. She was not interested in having her backside warmed. Thank you very much. Poor Maynard. Elizabeth and my wife, Frances, shared a birth date, January 24th, and they had a lunch together every year to celebrate. July 1st was our day to be Elizabeth's guests, watching the Canada Day parade pass on 17th Street and then going up to her apartment for lunch. And that schedule never varied for about 20 years. Those were the 2 days where we were on her dance card. Elizabeth was engaged twice to the same man, and he broke it off both times. The second time, Elizabeth told me, her mother and her aunt went to the fellow and begged him to take her back. And he would have none of it. That was back in England, apparently. One of her most passionate pet peeves was an open bathroom door. And I do not know why. She thought the sight of a toilet was disgusting and would have the door closed. I ran the youth choir here for a number of years, I still do, and I have scripted many themed services for the youth to present to the congregation. Elizabeth made a point of staying home on those Sundays as, and I quote, "I don't like worship led by children." She attended one by accident some years ago and remarked afterward that it was very good. And that's when I knew she was starting to decline. I became Elizabeth's chaperone to her doctor's appointments in recent years, mostly because her short-term memory was failing, and she had very little use for her GP, who was quite young and had a habit of telling her the truth about herself. And she didn't care for that. My favorite interchange between them was when he asked her about her alcohol use, and she said, "Oh, I don't drink liquor. I only drink sherry." And the doctor said nothing for a bit and then moved on to the next topic. As Elizabeth became somewhat frail, she spent more and more time on her own at home. She had a rather business-like relationship with God. She had decided that she would die at 90, and God kept her going for 5 extra years, and she really resented that. As she declined, her stories started to go further back in time, her reminiscences. She talked a lot about how she used to meet her father at the bus stop after his work because he had lost a leg in the First World War, and she would help him home from the bus because it was an incline back to their house. She talked many times to me. I bet I heard this story 25 times in 3 years, how there was a young mother with 2 children outside the kitchen window at their home in Newcastle, stuck in a blowing rainstorm, and Elizabeth went out to rescue her and these 2 kids. I don't know why that story stuck in her mind, but she remembered it very, very vividly 75 years later. She remembered her father taking the train from Newcastle to Keswick during the war when Elizabeth was evacuated to the Lake District for safety. And she did say often that she's looking forward to being reunited with her family. She was fully aware of how self-indulgent she was and made no apologies for it. She could also be very generous, even beyond letting you keep the change when you did her shopping for her. The week before Elizabeth died, Allison and I tried for 90 minutes to get her to go to emergency as she had lost the strength to walk the length of the room. She made 3 or 4 valiant attempts to cross the room with her walker. It must have been exhausting for her. She could hardly hold herself up. I suggested that she just give up, and she looked me square in the eye and she said, "I never give up." And that was quite true. She does. She never gave up. If God wasn't going to let her die at 90, she certainly wasn't going to be cheated out of her wish to die at home. And so she refused to go to emergency because she was sure she wouldn't come out. And on January 27th, after a very pleasant 95th birthday 3 days previously, she got her way for the last time. And I wish her well on her journey. She waited a long time to go. So we're going to end our musical part of the evening with one more selection, and then we're going to ask the Reverend Julie Lees to come up and say a few words before we go back to the welcome space. We're almost done, I promise.
So please, so we must regret if we have failed.
you. That youth that us should have its flings hard on us, who's hard on us to our prerogative weakling. So pardon us, if we decline to dance and sing.
But youth, of course, must have its flings so pardon us. The daunting girl must have its fling behind on us. But youth, of course, must have its flings so pardon us. Tra-la-la-la-la-la-la, 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 tra-la-la-la-la-la-la-la.
Well, I'd like to suggest that the sherry is just the intermission and we come back for an hour or two more of Gilbert and Sullivan. That is great. There are lots of ways to honor and remember someone, and music has got to be one of the best ways to do that. In the Epistle of James, the author writes to early Christian churches, "Blessed is the one who remains steadfast under trial, for when they have stood the test, they will receive the crown of life, which God has promised to all who love him." I'm willing to bet that not one of us will reach our 90s without some trial and suffering. May Elizabeth be an example for us of the value of being steadfast through the challenging times. And as per her understanding, may we wish her the blessing of having received her crown of life by being reunited with her family in this life after life she is discovering now. We will all have an opportunity to continue sharing stories about Elizabeth in the welcome space and to drink some delicious Harvey's Bristol Cream Sherry. And in light of the kind, loving, generous, feisty personality I'm learning that Elizabeth had, allow me to leave you with this blessing based on a poem by Henry Emile. Life is short, and we do not have much time to gladden the hearts of those who make the journey with us. So be swift to love and make haste to be kind. And the blessing of God who made us, who loves us, and who travels with us, be with you now and forever. Amen.